And one thing when I was researching you, one thing that really stuck out to me was this move that you made from Australia over to America and into Silicon Valley. And I wanted to ask, was there a key moment that led to you making that decision to go to Silicon Valley?
Sure. So right before I moved over to SF, I did two years in Canberra, and I worked at the Australian National Audit Office. And 2 years in Canberra, like I initially started very optimistic about sort of government. I wanted to learn how government works. I wanted to learn how the military worked. I spent a lot of time looking at consulting and audit projects for the military and also Department of Finance. But then I got to the end of 2 years and I just wasn't being challenged. I felt like I was in my mid-20s, and I looked at people 5, 10, 15 years sort of older than me, and I didn't really find that trajectory was too challenging. And so I've always been a big believer like I think all Aussies should go and work overseas. And so I reached out to a few networks at PwC where I worked in Melbourne for a bit, and then said, look, I really want to go to San Francisco. And people said, look, it's a lot like Melbourne. The coffee scene is just as good. It's just as expensive. Interestingly, there was either that or Germany. That was sort of the thing. And I sort of hated German food anyway. So made the move across to San Francisco and was, there for about 2 years. And that's sort of where I caught the tech bug. So
Mm,
worked on the Uber IPO, just met some amazing people and saw the work ethic and the entrepreneurialism and just changed my outlook on many things, not sort of just work related, but sort of life more generally. And then you work overseas, you go there and you see folks that have gone to Harvard and Stanford and some of the elite universities and work in these amazing jobs. And you try to internalize some of those learnings and bring them back home. And that's sort of what I've tried to do, sort of being with Airwallex right now and doing a whole bunch of some mentoring and advisory work as well.
yeah. Yeah, that's really exciting. And are there any key, like you mentioned you were connecting with people that went to these like Ivy League unis, which is incredible. But are there any, what are the main lessons that you've taken from connecting with those people and working on those projects? Is there anything that really sticks out to you as something that you've taken back?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's like being in Australia. I think sort of growing up in Australia, like we came to Australia when I was 8 and grew up in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. And for a long time, that was sort of the world I knew, so the northern suburbs of Melbourne. And then you meet other Aussies when you travel, and you see that their perspectives are global, right? And your ability to make a difference is global. And so when I meet sort of folks in San Francisco, the biggest takeaway for me is that, like, don't be afraid of starting an idea or having a business that can have a global impact on things. Sometimes in Melbourne, we can sort of get isolated, or even in Australia, we can get isolated being on this part of the world and sort of lose sight of what's going on in the States and Europe. But that's almost the antithesis of what I saw folks in San Francisco. They're like, look, there's a big problem. I'm going to try to fix it globally, and there is nothing that, and I'm not going to take no for an answer. So that relentless optimism, that relentless drive is what I saw in many Aussies in San Francisco and many sort of US folks out there as well. And I highly recommend all graduates, all sort of young adults to go over to the States, experience it, almost see that secret source of optimism, positivity, a relentless ambition, the drive to basically, there's a problem, I'm going to try to fix it. That the grind, that hustle is sometimes we lack that in Australia. Like, I'll give you a really good example. Like you go there and you meet folks that have second or third jobs, as grads. They'll be a grad at sort of PwC, and then on the side they'll do tutoring, or they're a nurse, but on the side and on weekends they might work sort of retail as well, which that sort of concept of having second and third jobs is very foreign, at least in sort of the circles that I hang around in Australia. And it's not to say that's a positive, because there are a whole bunch of sort of social issues that are there that forces people to be in that position. But just that grit and that determination and that positivity and that relentless drive is something that really stood out to me when I was there.